Last June, on top of the news, was the disappearance of the submersible that went down to visit the Titanic. And after a few hours of starting the dive, lost contact with the supply ship and just disappeared. They started looking for it, and the searchers, after a few days, not too long, 2 or 3 days, determined that there had been a terrible accident, an implosion, and all 5 people in the submersible, it was a very mini submarine, had died. Among the people aboard were Stockton Rush, who was the owner of the company that owned that submersible, and the pilot of that craft, and also 3 passengers, paying passengers. 2 of them were the Daouds, a father and son pair from Pakistanis living in England, and then another one, a French passenger. A few days later, it was reported that Stockton Rush had offered the seats or the opportunity to visit the Titanic to another father and pair, the Blooms from Nevada, from Las Vegas, which they refused going because they were concerned about safety. So here we can see an example of choice. The Dawood, the Blooms, chose not to go, and they lived. The Dawood chose to go, and they died, because choices have consequences. Sometimes the consequences are unintended, of course, but still, there are consequences. And that reminded me of what Moses has been telling the Israelites for quite a few parshiot now. Today's parasha starts with Moses' words that says, "See, I'm giving you a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey God's mitzvot, commands. A curse if you don't do that and you go and start worshiping other gods and become idolaters." And Moses will repeat the same idea a few times. 4 parashiot from today, I think, he will say it in a more detailed words. We will say, "Here I present to you life and death, blessing and curse, with the same conditions. Blessings if you obey and if you follow God and you worship God. Curses if you don't, and if you go become idolaters." Choices are very important in Jewish thought, in Jewish religion, in Judaism in general. And there are several examples of people making choices in the Torah. I think we can begin with Adam and Eve. God told them, "Don't eat the fruit from the tree." Well, they chose to eat, and here we are today. Abram at the time was told by God to leave his home and his homeland to go to an unknown place, and he went. It may be debatable if he had a choice there, but still, he chose to do that. And then one very good example, which is very explicit in the Torah, is when Abraham's servant goes back to Aram, to his family, to look for a bride or a wife for Abraham's son Isaac, and he finds Rebekah. And when he's ready to bring her back to Canaan, he asks her family for the permission, and they say, "Let us call the girl and ask for her reply." And they ask her, and she said, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "Yes." So that's a very clear example of a choice. And then we have when the elders of Israel come to Samuel and they ask him for a king. That was also a choice. Joseph, when dealing with his brothers, which is a very dramatic sequence of events, Joseph, in a way, plays with them a little bit. He takes his revenge in a way, but he chooses to do many different things. And then another good example will be Ruth following Naomi to Canaan. Naomi tells her, stay here, you don't have to go. And she said, yes, I want to go. She chose to do that. Now, choices not only in the Torah and the following writings like the Talmud and other writings, not only applies to actions, to things that people do or shouldn't do, but also to speech. And speech is a very important aspect of Judaism. Speech is very powerful. One of the Ten Commandments says, for instance, don't bear false witness. And the Talmud takes that idea and goes on for pages about witnesses, what kind of witnesses you can have, and especially false witnesses. And then the Torah says, don't curse a deaf person. And a good one, it says, don't go around gossiping, which is hard to obey, I think. But it's still a choice. Don't go around gossiping. And that is the origin of Lashon Hara. And then another important one is don't humiliate or even embarrass people in public. The Talmud says embarrassing somebody in public is akin to murder. It's like somebody shed blood. Is that important? It also said people that humiliate other people don't have a place in the world to come. One example from the Torah is when Joseph decides to reveal himself to his brothers, he kicks everybody else, all the Egyptians that were in the room, out because he didn't want the brothers to feel embarrassed because he had to remind them of their past. Another advice that the literature, the rabbis give is don't remind somebody of his past, especially if the past wasn't that kosher. If there was something there, don't remind them. Don't expose someone's ignorance in public, etc. Just to quote Rabbi Telushkin, he says, guarding one's speech is an important aspect of Jewish ethics, and it's intended to promote harmony, respect, and community well-being. But then there is a problem because the Torah says, Ocheach tochiach et amitecha, rebuke your fellow. And rebuking, which is criticizing, it's difficult. No matter how gently you do it or diplomatically you do it, it can cause problems. The person may get mad, you may lose a friend, etc. We know that. So I was looking for a practical advice of how to do it. And I looked in the Torah, the Tanakh, the Talmud, the writer couldn't find it. But I found it in Facebook. Somebody posted, before you say something, especially if you're going to say something a little critical, think of three things. First of all, does it have to be said? Second, does it have to be said now? Third, does it have to be said by me? If the answer to any of these three questions is no, don't say anything. But sometimes you can't win. A Jewish mother gives her son 2 ties as present for his birthday, a blue tie and a red tie. Next time the son comes to visit, tells his mother, look, Mom, I'm wearing the red tie that you gave me. What, you didn't like the other one? Shabbat Shalom.